Have you ever asked ChatGPT to recommend the best tools or brands in your category, and your company just wasn't there? Not on the list, not even mentioned, even though you know you're relevant. Now, most people look at that and assume it is a ranking problem. They think, we need a better page, we need more SEO, we need more mentions. But often, the real problem runs deeper than that. The issue is not that your page failed to rank. The issue is that the AI never learned to associate your brand with the topics your buyers actually ask about. And that is exactly where AI Topical Presence comes in. AI Topical Presence is a metric that measures how strongly and how broadly a brand is associated with the relevant commercial topics in AI generated recommendations. And that distinction matters because AI Sure Voice tells you whether you appear in AI generated answers, but AI Topical Presence tells you what you appear for. And that is the question that explains your score and tells you what to do next. So in this video, I want to break down what AI Topical Presence actually is, why it matters, how AI models from these associations, and what a topical gap is really telling you about your brand. Let's start with the simplest version. Google ranks pages, and AI models build associations. That is the big shift. In traditional search, you create a page, optimize it for a keyword, build links, improve relevance, and ideally, that page ranks. But when someone asks ChatGPT, Gemini, or Perplexity for a recommendation, the system is not behaving like Google. It is not simply scanning the web and ranking a list of pages in the way search engines do. Instead, the model draws on a large network of associations it built during training. That network comes from billions of web pages, reviews, forums, documentation, community discussions, comparison articles, and all kinds of public content absorbed over a training window that may be 1 to 3 years old. From all that, the model forms a kind of mental map of the market. It learns which brands exist, what they are known for, which use cases they cover, and which standards, frameworks, or capabilities they tend to be associated with. So when a buyer asks for a recommendation, the model is not really ranking pages. It is matching brands to concepts. That is a completely different game. And it explains why a brand can rank very well in Google and still be nearly invisible in AI recommendations. You might have a page ranking number 1 for something like endpoint protection software. But if the broader web never really taught the model to connect your brand to endpoint protection, to zero trust, to compliance, to threat detection, to enterprise security workflows, then that page ranking does not automatically translate into AI visibility. The page exists, but the conceptual territory was never built. And AI visibility depends on conceptual territory. It depends on the depth and breadth of the associations the model has learned about your brand. So what do we mean by topic association? Topic association is simply the set of concepts the AI connects to your brand when generating recommendations. Let's say you're in cybersecurity. When someone asks an AI assistant to recommend enterprise security tools, the model is not just retrieving a list of brand names out of nowhere. It is matching brands against a cluster of associated ideas. Things like endpoint protection, zero trust architecture, threat intelligence, identity and access management, SOC2, ISO 27001, and NIST. A brand that is strongly associated with all those topics will appear much more consistently in AI recommendations. A brand that is only associated with one or two of them, or only weakly, will appear rarely or not at all. And this is the gap that AI Topical Presence is designed to surface. Not just you're not mentioned, but the AI does not connect your brand to these specific topics that buyers ask about. That is a much more useful insight, because now you're dealing with the vague visibility problems. You're dealing with a diagnosable association problem. And those topic association gaps usually come in two forms. The first is missing associations. That means the AI has simply not learned to connect your brand to a relevant concept. Maybe your site does not really cover the topic. Maybe your product supports it, but the documentation is weak. Maybe you do not appear in discussions, comparisons, or third-party content around that area. Whatever the reason, the model has little or no basis for making the connection. This is the most common issue. And importantly, it is also the most fixable. The second type is displaced associations. This is when a competitor has built such strong coverage around a topic that the AI connects that topic primarily to them. That one is harder to solve, but it's also less common than people think. Because unlike search rankings, the association layer in AI is not fully zero-sum. Multiple brands can be strongly associated with the same topic. The output layer, though, often is limited. Most recommendation prompts only return 3 to 5 brands. So even though associations can be shared, the visible recommendation space is still competitive. But in practice, most AI visibility gaps are not because a competitor owns the whole topic. They happen because your brand was simply absent from the conversation. And absence is much easier to fix than displacement. That is actually the good news here. Now, this is why measuring AI topical presence matters so much. Most teams begin with AI Sure Voice, and that makes sense. Sure Voice tells you how often your brand appears across a set of relevant AI-generated answers. That is useful, but on its own, it's only a score. It is not a diagnosis. If your AI Sure Voice is 8%, that tells you where you stand. But it does not tell you why you are at 8%. It does not tell you which topics are helping you, which topics are missing, or how stable that visibility really is. Two brands can have the exact same share of voice score for completely different reasons. One brand might be lightly associated with a lot of topics. Another might be deeply associated with just 2 or 3 topics and invisible everywhere else. Same score, very different strategic picture. That is where AI topical presence becomes much more valuable. Because it answers 3 questions Sure Voice cannot answer clearly. First, where are you visible? Which topics does the AI associate with your brand and how strongly? Second, where are you missing? Which topics are important in your market, strongly associated with competitors, but not associated with you at all? And third, how fragile is your position? Is your visibility spread across many topics, or is it concentrated in 1 or 2? Because if it is concentrated, you are vulnerable. One model updates, one shift in weighting, one competitor improving coverage in that area, and your visibility can drop fast. Let's take an example. Imagine a cybersecurity brand with an AI Sure Voice of 12%. That sounds pretty decent in a competitive market. But then you look at its AI Topical Presence profile. And what you find is that it is strongly associated with firewall and antivirus, but almost absent from Zero Trust, SASE, and cloud security posture. That changes the interpretation completely. Because those missing topics are exactly the concepts buyers are asking about when evaluating modern enterprise security platforms. So yes, the brand has 12% share voice, but that visibility is fragile. It is concentrated in legacy concepts and missing from the topics that actually drive content buying decisions. That is why I like to put it this way. AI Sure Voice tells you if you appear, AI Topical Presence tells you what for, and you need both. A brand with high AI Sure Voice but weak topical presence may be visible often, but only shallowly. A brand with strong topical foundations but lower share voice may have built the right associations but not yet the wider reach. Together, those two metrics tell the full story. So how AI topical presence actually measured? At a high level, it is built from three components: depth, breadth, and concentration. Depth measures how strongly the AI connects your brand to important topics. Not just any topics, the topics that matter commercially in your market. So if your brand appears frequently in AI recommendations tied to high intent, high value topics, your depth score goes up. Breadth measures how many of the important topics in your market the AI connects to your brand. This matters because buyers ask questions in lots of different ways. A brand with broad topical associations can appear across more recommendation prompts. A brand with narrow associations only appears when the wording happens to match its small set of strong topics. Then there is concentration. This looks at how evenly your associations are distributed. If one topic accounts for most of your AI visibility, that is a risk. It means you're effectively a one-topic brand in the AI's understanding of the market, and that kind of visibility is fragile. So the strongest AI topical presence scores usually comes from brands that are not just strong on one topic, but meaningfully associated with many relevant topics, without depending too heavily on any single one. Now here's another important point. When AI topical presence reveals a gap, the answer is not automatically, let's write a page. That reaction is often too fast. Because a topical gap can mean three different things. It could be a product gap. Your product may not actually support that capability at all. In that case, creating content about it could create a much bigger problem: visibility for something you cannot deliver. Or it could be a documentation gap. Your product does support it, but it is not explained clearly enough, structured well enough, or distributed widely enough for the AI to pick up the association. Or it could be a content depth gap. Maybe you have mentioned the topic, but only lightly. The coverage is too thin, too isolated, or too narrow for the model to build a meaningful connection. And each of those leads somewhere different. A product gap is a roadmap conversation. A documentation gap is a technical writing conversation. A content gap is a content strategy conversation. That is what makes AI topical presence strategically useful. It forces the right question before the content budget gets spent. The real question is not, do we have a page about this topic? The real question is, if someone read everything the AI knows about this topic, would our brand emerge as a credible and knowledgeable participant in the conversation? That is a much higher bar, and honestly, it's a much better one. So to bring this all together, AI topical presence is not a vanity metric. It is a diagnostic metric. It tells you where your brand sits inside the AI's model of your market. It tells you which topics the AI already connects to your brand, which ones it does not, which ones competitors are stronger on, and whether your current AI visibility is stable or dangerously concentrated. For SEO teams, this changes the job. The goal is no longer just to rank pages. The goal is to build conceptual territory, the kind of territory AI systems learn to associate with your brand across recommendation and discovery surfaces. And for CMOs, it answers a question that most dashboards still do not answer. What does AI think our brand is relevant for? And what does it think our competitors are relevant for? Those are increasingly the questions that shape whether your brand appears in the recommendation before the buyer ever gets to your sales team. And that is exactly why AI Topical Presence matters. Thanks for watching.